post-harvest management. One of the greatest challenges and reasons farmers fail to achieve the potential of their land is what happens at the end of the season. Once all the important work in attaining the highest potential for your field and have brought your plants to the point of making fruit, farmers tend to draw back and think their work is done. The farmer has worked hard up to this point doing land preparation, mulching, fertilization, planting, weeding, thinning, top dressing, and weeding again. But there is more work to be done after the second top dressing and the maize plant has begun to tassel. This is true for all field crops. Weeding. For all crops, but especially for maize, it is important that we do not allow weeds to grow in our field towards the end of the season. At tasseling and second top dressing, farmers often decide that they no longer need to weed, because there will be little effect in the current harvest. What happens though is that the weeds return with the last rains of the season, and if they are not removed, will drop seeds in our field for the winter months. There can also be an irritation during the harvest when all the weed seeds stick to our clothing. Remember this little verse: 1 year of seeds equals 7 years of weeds. It is easy to continue to protect our fields till the dry season arrives, ensuring that there are no weeds to drop seeds, which will create more work and challenges for us in the next season and into the future. Also, remember, it is much easier to deal with small weeds than large ones. Weeds are like thieves, and the larger they are, the more they will steal sunlight, water, and nutrients from our field. Our mulch is part of this remedy to help control the germination and growth of weeds, as discussed later in post-harvest stalk lodging. Harvesting. At the end of the season, when our maize has dried, we need to determine if it is ready to be harvested. If we harvest our grain too early, then we will need to dry it further before we can store it. If we leave it on the plant for too long, we risk the loss from theft, insect infestation, and mold damage. So how are we able to tell when our grain is ready to harvest? Most grains need to be dried to 12 to 13% moisture before they are ready for storage. How can we tell our grain is dry enough? There is a very cheap and easy method of testing this. Get a glass jar with a lid, a handful of freshly harvested maize, and a tablespoon of salt. Shake the grain and salt vigorously together in the jar for at least 1 minute. If any of the salt sticks to the grains after this, it indicates the grain is still above 13%. If all the salt falls to the bottom of the bottle after shaking and does not stick to the grain or the jar, then the grain is dry enough to be stored. When we harvest our maize, we recommend that the stalks be left standing in place and not gathered into stooks, as is often the case. This method of building stooks is often used to reduce risk of theft, but requires much more labor in both the building of the stooks and the returning of the material back to the field where it is needed as mulch. A second reason for leaving the stalks in place is if a cover crop is grown in relay with the maize so that the dry maize stalks can act as a support structure for the cover crop, such as Dolicho's lab. Thirdly, there is a risk of creating safe havens for the maize stalk borer if we cut the maize stalks. When we leave a stump of the maize stalk, we provide the perfect environment for the stalk borer pupae to survive into the next season. We should break the stalks off at ground level with our feet and lay them down in our rows as our mulch blanket. Drying of maize. It is important that maize is dried sufficiently before it is stored away. If it is not completely dry, you might have problems like mold growth, insect infestation, and seed germination. Molds grow in our storage areas, which causes grain to spoil with aflatoxins. Insect eggs are always present on seed, and if stored in the wrong way, these insects will hatch and damage our grain in a very short space of time. The seed that we are storing will germinate if the conditions are warm and moist, which will lead us to losing all of our stored food. Statistics say that 65% of all food grown in Africa is never eaten because it spoils due to poor storage methods. All these factors are disastrous in stored grain, so make sure all the grain is well dried before sealing into a storage container. Maize can be dried in several ways. Normally, drying is done with maize still on the cob. The most common method is to place it on a sheet of some kind and place it into the direct sunlight. The cobs should be moved daily to avoid sunburn. Another popular method is to build a large storage bin above ground with poles and netting wire. This is ideal for areas where the post-harvest season is dry with no risk of rain. Post-harvest stalk lodging. Once all the maize has been removed from the field, we can knock down the stalks to be the mulch cover to protect the fields over winter. Remember to use your feet to break the stalks at ground level and then lie them down in the rows. This mulch will do many good things like aid in suppressing weed growth, capture all the moisture that falls as rainfall, reduce evaporation of moisture from the field, cool and moderate the temperature of the soil, feed the microbes in the soil, add to the carbon and organic matter in the soil. We should attempt to keep our fields covered with mulch throughout the dry winter season. This material on the field is far more valuable on our soil than used for any other purpose like feeding livestock. If we feed and protect our soil, it in turn will feed us. Cleaning of grain. The cleaning of your grain is very important. Clean grain stores better. It will also fetch a much higher price when sold. When we clean the grain, we must be careful to remove straw, weeds, dirt, seeds, and insects. Most farmers simply winnow the grain to remove all the foreign material. This is cheap and effective. Machines can also be used. Here, screens of different sizes sieve and sort the grain from the unwanted material. It must be noted that machinery can often damage the grain and make it more susceptible to insect attack. Chapter 2. Grain storage. Why is grain storage important? Grain is food for the family that must be preserved till the next season. If it is not stored well, it will lose quality and not be as nutritious to eat. Seed is also important for planting. The seeds are alive and need to be treated in a way that their germination potential is not compromised. This would result in poor plant stands and poor growth rates. If we can store our grain, we are not forced to sell at a low price and can keep it till the price is right. Grain is alive and must be protected. It needs to breathe. It must be kept dry and cool. The conditions must not allow the seed to germinate in storage. Challenges faced with grain storage: harvesting, drying, storing, insects, rodents, and molds. Insects. It is important to understand which insects are challenging you and what their life cycles are. Some adults are the pest in the form of a beetle or weevil, and others the larva is the pest, and the adult is simply a moth. If we understand the life cycles, it makes it much easier to deal with the insects. Insects eat and ruin large amounts of grain. Many of them live and grow inside the kernel, so the damage is done before they are seen. The breeding of the insects is related to the temperature and the moisture of the environment where your grain is being stored. Grain insect pests are classified into two main categories: primary and secondary. Some examples of primary pests are the lesser grain borer and the granary weevil. The primary insect adults can break down a hard seed coat of undamaged grain and then lay their eggs in the kernel of the seed. The growing larvae then live and eat inside of the kernel. By the time they emerge to be seen, the damage has already been done. Secondary pests. Examples are the rusty grain beetle and the Indian meal moth. Secondary pests are normally only able to feed on broken grain or flour. Often the web-like threads can be seen in infested containers. Some of these pests can live for several years and thus can cause serious damage. Insects can be controlled with insecticides. Dusts. These are ready to use and are simply wettable powders. Mix with water and spray. usually to kill insects in the storage area. Fumigants, extremely poisonous. These should only be used in areas that are airtight and left closed for several days. Some control measures without insecticides. Place grain in direct sunlight, mixing local plants with grain, mixing with sand or wood ash, smoking, storing in airtight containers, storing unthreshed grain. Rodents. Rats and mice eat a lot of grain. They are always attracted to storage areas if there is food available. It is important to keep grain out of the reach of rats and mice to reduce this pressure. So, keep your storage areas clean. Rodents can cause damage to bags, which do not protect grain from rats or insects. One of the easiest ways to control rats is to own a cat. Ensure your storage areas are rat-proof, with no entrance options at all. Rat traps are effective, but prevention is always better than cure, so keep them out and away. Poisons such as warfarin are effective, but poison often affects the next level of predators, such as your pets. Thus, in conclusion, your storage unit must be moisture-proof, insect-proof, and rat-proof. It must be stored in a dry, cool place. When sealing your container, fill it to 95%. Place a small piece of candle into the grain in the container. Light the candle. Once the candle is lit, seal the container. Due to the fact that the container is full of, the little oxygen left inside will be used up with 10 seconds and the candle will go out. It is very important that you do not open the container again, unless you intend to repeat this process. The candle will stay in the container with the grain. It is also important that your container does not leak, because if air is able to get into the container, the candle will not go out and the flame will burn a hole in the lid of your container.